You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you a little bit about our current sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. As you well know, if you've been following This is Oklahoma, they've been a huge part of this podcast. So this podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling an Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Also, for the podcast, a new sponsor, RCB Bank. Since 1936, RCB Bank has offered progressive products and a friendly service. Come in today to find out more about their loan promotion on new, used, refinance cars, boats, campers, and ATVs. Visit RCB Bank to learn more. RCB Bank, that's my bank. With approved credit, restrictions apply. Now, let's get into today's episode. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode down at the Bedford studio today with musician Donovan Funk. Mate, thanks for coming down.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Like I said just now, I sadly don't have many musicians on, which needs to change. But I'm glad you reached out. Some people who listen to the podcast will know that, guests come from referrals and some people don't like to reach out, but I'm glad you did. I'm excited to dive into the story and learn about, the music that you make and why you got into music. So I guess from a young age then, where does music start for you?
Yeah, so, my first memory with music is like listening to Led Zeppelin with my dad, Neil Young, lots of like classic rock.
Yeah.
And then I was really, really small. I'm still kind of small, but I was really small for my age in elementary school. And this group of like orchestra musicians came through, and they kind of encouraged us to pick an instrument to play. And so in fourth grade, I started playing the biggest one that I could, because that means that I'm a big person.
Coolest, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that's how I got started into playing music. I played a little bit of electric guitar, took lessons and stuff when I was in elementary school too. Then I stopped doing that until about 2 years ago.
And picked it back up.
Yeah.
Cool. So clearly always had an interest in music, and Led Zeppelin and Van Halen and just all of that.
Absolutely.
So much. The sad thing now is, like, to me, I'm 30. To me, classic rock now, like classic rock to me is that, right?
Right.
But someone said to me the other day that like the Foo Fighters are now classic rock.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
Like, no, I refuse to listen. Like, then there's no way. I refuse to hear that. Like, they're not. Like, they were coming out like. They're not peak when I was in high school, but like still, like they're not classic yet. Like classic to me is like AC/DC, right, and the Rolling Stones and the Who.
Absolutely,
But it's so fun. Like when we get older, they're like, "Oh no, this is classic to people who are now in high school." I'm like, "No, it's just not. This is amazing music." So listening to music with Dad is like the earliest memory. In Oklahoma, then you grew up, born and raised here as well.
Yeah. So I was like born in Lexington, which is around Noble.
Yeah.
And then I moved here in elementary school to the city, and I haven't moved since. I've traveled a lot, especially when I was younger with my family. But there's nothing that feels better than this city to me.
Yeah, because it's. This has been said again many times on the podcast. It's the feeling of like potential growth here, the opportunity, and it's like, to use a phrase that's been used far too much recently, is it feels like it's going to the moon. It's on a rocket ship, right? So you obviously get into music at a young age, pick your first instrument, start playing. From then, are you just kind of hooked and everything you want to do and in life is centered around music?
Honestly, no. For a long time, I did photography, and then I did a little bit of videography, graphic design.
Okay.
That was about, that was my high school years. I went to Quartz Mountain for photography.
Okay.
I met a guy named Kurt Marcus, and he was fantastic to work with. And he's traveled all over the place taking photos. And so that was pretty interesting. And then I got into like graphic design. I started working with some musicians and started to realize like, oh, I kind of like doing music, you know? And I started helping them in the studio and stuff. There's this band called Dead Week that I work with sometimes, and I've produced some of the songs that they put out, and a lot of that really helped me figure out that I wanted to do music.
Got you. So all the background stuff, then the behind the scenes stuff, that all the technical stuff that makes them do what they do, and then the creative side of you producing and everything, like. Usually that's the other way around, isn't it? Usually, like, people just want to play.
Right.
They don't want to deal with anything that's behind, the scenes or whatever. But that's really good because you get an appreciation now as an artist for everybody who does that and produces that, and you don't have to rely on anyone else to produce your own music.
Definitely. Yeah, fortunately, I live with my brother, who is the drummer for Dead Week. And we have a third bedroom, and I get to just have that as my space. Yeah. And it's just like the studio setup, and that's been really fortunate for me.
Yeah. Awesome. So currently then you are, I guess we'll touch on currently in a minute, but you're producing stuff, you get through high school and do the graphic stuff. Do you go to university, or do you think I'm going to play music and that's going to be my thing?
I did college for a little bit because my mom was willing to pay for it. And there's a lot of people that don't get to go to college, and I was like, if I have the opportunity, I should do it. But I think that form of learning just doesn't work well for me, and it doesn't inspire me, and if I'm not inspired, I just don't do stuff.
Wasting time, and you see your mom's wasting her money.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And so it definitely, I still like to learn a lot, but just not in that format, and it was a nice experience, and it was just community college. I didn't ever do like the whole party freshman year thing, but I'm kind of glad I didn't.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, there's part of me that's like, what would it have been like to go to a big school, because I didn't go to a big school, but part of me is like, I don't like people. I don't like being around like giant loads of people, too much people.
Right.
But yeah, it can be fun. I mean, now the position you're in, you'd rather play to a bunch of people, right? Rather than be on stage.
Yeah, if I can't be the center of attention, then I don't want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So, where does like your kind of your theme, your personality, your kind of like musical talent and persona come from then? Like, where do you draw that from?
I think it's really just a lot of personal experiences. I grew up kind of conservative, and then through high school and stuff, I kind of got to experience other things and talk to a lot of people and get to know a lot of people. And that's what most of my music is about. Like, I really just want to make a community where people can talk about whatever, anybody's welcome. And a lot of the themes that I talk about are deeper. Yeah. And it's not to say that it's like I'm super intelligent, but it's just like there's so many things that are hard to talk about, like death. Like when you first meet somebody, it's like, how do you talk about your experience with death? But that's something that's on my mind a lot. And so I think my goal and where I draw inspiration from is community. Yeah, and that's one of the great things that music does, right? It brings people together, reminds them of family time. You talk about death, right? It reminds them of, people who've passed, but you remember having time. Songs, you always relate songs to people, right? Absolutely. And like the time in your life, and when people hear songs, they're like, oh, this was like the killer song in high school, and it reminds me of like all my buddies or whatever, or like driving somewhere and you're blaring that music, and it's it definitely hits the feels, doesn't it? Yeah. Which is good now. And then you're on, you're like giving this person that experience now, right? Like you're on the opposite end of the table, which as a creative and as a musician, that's what you want. You want to see people react to you that way and have that community and reach out. I mean, like, I hear this song and it brought back memories or whatever, and it makes me feel good. And you're like, yeah, that's kind of why I make music every day. Right. Yeah. It's really special. Gets you out of bed every day for sure. So what, for you then, what's like the music scene like in Oklahoma? For people who don't know that like Oklahoma's good for music. Yeah, so I think that it's probably the most supportive community I've ever come across. I mean, like I said, I've done a lot of creative things, and I have not met people that are as supportive, and even just like even the fans. Yeah. I mean, I went to this Paramore concert, and the opener was just like almost in tears because we just like clapped for him.
Right.
Like that was it.
Yeah, because they're just usually like no one cares who the opener
They're
is.
like, whatever.
Yeah,
Let's see Paramore.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of my first experience with being like, this is something special like that Oklahoma City has that I don't think a lot of places do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've worked with like, you know, Christian Pearson of OK Sessions, and he's super supportive. Everybody that I've met through him is just like, they're just like really encouraging.
Yeah.
And that's something special because it's like people really want to be protective of their stuff and they want to think, oh, I'm the greatest, but I don't really experience that here.
Yeah.
It's like they realize that it's not a limited supply. You know, it's not a limited resource. You can be supportive to as many people as you want, and you don't lose anything other than saying a few words.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I'm sure it feels good, too, to know that you have the support of people that you're kind of competing with, right? Like,
right.
They're your competition. But what's it like from, like, a venue standpoint? Are the venues quite welcoming to have you and stuff like that?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've worked with Dig It, which isn't, like, necessarily a venue, but they do shows a lot. And I've really just kind of scratched the surface with doing shows. I'm kind of reluctant to put myself out there yet. And I want to build some footage that I can give to venues.
Sure.
So I haven't worked with very many, but Christian Pearson helped me get into Skirvin, and I did an opening set for them, and that was incredible. But I really like the look of a lot of our venues. You know, I've watched shows at the Jones Assembly. I've watched shows at Tower, and they're at that level that I think a lot of places should be.
Yeah.
And so I think that the venues here are fantastic.
Would Jones be on the list of one of the places that, like, hey, by the end of the year or by the end of next year, I want to be on the list of playing Jones?
Yeah, definitely. I want to start opening for people at those places. I mean, I went and saw a group at Tower Theater one time, and I was like, this is where I want to be. Yeah. You know, it was perfect. And so, those are definitely goals of mine to perform at those places.
Definitely. And it's cool that, like, you want to keep, you know, obviously it's great to travel, right? It'd be great to go to Tulsa and great to play, you know, in other states and stuff. But when you grow up around an area and you have a venue like the Jones and like Tower and like Criterion and other places, you're like, I want to play my home. You know, I want to play my home state and home fans and home city. And I mean, no doubt you'll have a bunch of support there, but I'm sure it'd feel great to, like, what was it like when you played the Skirvin? Like, just
that was great. Yeah, it was a little weird because
it's a kind of different crowd, is it?
Yeah, so we were there for the jazz club that Christian Pearson hosts, and my music was a little bit different for them. It was an older crowd, but like Dig It, I mean, when I talk about support, you know, that was just amazing. And there was this one couple that just stood there and were singing along the whole time with me, and I love that stuff.
You find it hard to concentrate sometimes. You're like, there's people singing with me.
Yeah. It's awesome. Well, I love it. And it really, I mean, it encourages me to keep going because it's like these people are enjoying it and they stood there the whole set. And that means more than anything to me. Yeah. You know,
it seems like Oklahoma City and Oklahoma has a huge support for the arts in general.
Yes,
right.
Yeah,
and obviously music's a part of that. And having shows and, you know, I think people who probably out here, people seem to like just go and hang out at a show, even if they've never heard, like they probably never heard of you before, right? Or never heard of anyone else. Then they just like, let's just go try it out. Like I have a friend of mine who he goes to every show at the Jones, regardless of who it is. He's just like, we're just going every time. I'm like, oh.
Right, because if you go with three people, and the group or the musician isn't very good, you can talk to people,
right?
But if they are good, then you just watch them.
Yeah. And I asked him, I said, why? Like for me, like I listen to people, and I'm like, I want to go see them live. Whereas he's like he goes for that community aspect and the scene, and just kind of go and hang out. And you're right, it's like, oh, the musician's there as well, but it helps having friends, community to go along with that.
Absolutely.
So with like your like music genre, then it's obviously, you just mentioned it's not very jazzy, but you know, where does that come from for you? Like where do you plan on kind of, I guess, keeping it the same or just evolving into other stuff?
Yeah. I really, so right now I kind of put myself into the indie rock and alternative genre, and I think that genres are so hard to define now, because it's like there's millions of them, and
then Old Town Road comes out,
right? Exactly. It's like, and there's genre blending, so it's really like, I think where it came from was having that classic rock background and that kind of gives me the ideas for the guitars and that kind of stuff that I do. But then it really evolved with more modern, like bedroom pop kind of music, because that's what I can physically do by myself.
Right.
That's what I'm capable of doing. And so there's inspiration from both of those places.
Yeah. And currently you're working on your album, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm working on an album. It's been a little slow lately, but I'm hoping by the end of the year to have one out.
Yeah. Slow because you're kind of a perfectionist?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely a perfectionist.
Yeah.
And also just kind of finding the time and motivation, kind of like in the single that I just released in May, In All My Glory. That's kind of what I touch on. I'm like, man, it's hard just to brush my hair,
Yeah. Hey, life struggles, right?
Absolutely.
And the rock and roll lifestyle, which is not great, not easy to live during COVID, for
right.
sure. But thankfully, we're on the other side of that now.
I know.
Have you been to many shows recently?
Yeah. I actually just got back from Arkansas this morning. I went and saw Starbenders, and that, talk about classic rock.
Yeah.
They are bringing it back. They're incredible. And so I've been going to as many shows as I can. Anytime I see one on my Instagram feed, I try to go. I just went and saw the OKC Phil do their country show. Okay. And they had Kylie Morgan, Kyle Dillingham, and Christian Pearson kind of led the rhythm section. And that was a great show. That really brought a lot of crowds together that wouldn't typically be together.
Right, yeah.
And so I'm happy to see stuff starting to kick off again.
Right. And the acceptance of going in, hanging out, being in a crowd, and thankfully, you're right, things are kicking off again. And I went to see a show, it's probably about a month ago now, at the Tower, and it was good to see a show, but it was like we were sat at a table the whole time. And it's not the same. And I'd seen the person before, like in Tulsa, like 2 or 3 years ago, and she was amazing. And then you see her at Tower, and she's still amazing, but like there's no crowd there, there's no atmosphere, right? It's like she's rocking out on stage. It was Jackie Vincent who played. She's rocking out on stage and like just sat there. Like, is this what it feels like to just like watch, just be sat?
Right.
And it was a weird experience.
Yeah, it is a really weird format, and it's really hard as a performer.
Yeah.
Whenever there's not a crowd, or they have to sit down, and you can't draw your energy from them because
no one's bouncing, jumping around, singing.
Right. When you're performing, you can do as much as you can, but if there's not a crowd to give you that energy, then it doesn't really go anywhere.
Right. So with the events, I guess that's coming up, are you playing indoor, outdoor as well? Like you're just trying to play as much as possible?
Mostly outdoor. As much as I can.
Yeah.
Which typically starts off outdoor, which is interesting for the heat.
Summer.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But we seem to make it work, and I try to time it as late as I can, so at least the sun goes down.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly outdoor. I'd be happy to play anywhere.
Sure.
And it's, I don't have an ego about where I play, because I can meet somebody anywhere.
Right.
And it's just fun. It's always good practice, and it's just fun. I don't do it for money or anything like that. I just do it to hang out with people.
Well, because you love doing it, right? It's a passion that clearly, there's plenty of people that have been on the podcast that do what they do because they love doing it.
Absolutely.
And the money follows after that, but it never starts with, I'm going to get into this because I want to make tons of money. Because I think if you get into the music world and you think I'm going to make tons of money, there's 9 million other people who are trying to do the same thing.
I know.
Right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And everyone's just and I've heard the music industry is crazy with, just contracts and everything, clauses, and you can Google Taylor Swift's contract and there's a bunch of stuff in there that you just like, this is chaos. How have you played out at Sisdale Park yet?
I haven't played there.
Okay.
I went, so that OKC Phil thing was at Scissortail.
Okay.
And then I also went and saw Kings of Leon when they first came. I was as close as I could get. Yeah. It was like one row in front of me, and so I was like second row, and that was amazing. And honestly, that concert really helped drive me to do more music.
Okay.
So I grew up, like, my stepdad listened to Kings of Leon, and I didn't ever really care. And then when I heard they were going to come, I was like, oh, I'll listen to their music. And then I just, like, haven't stopped since. It's been like a year and a half.
Yeah, I haven't really heard much of the new album, but
really?
I've seen them twice back home. I was driving back, I think. I was driving back from vacation, I think, when we came through Oklahoma City when they were performing that day. And I was just like, I really want to go down, but then I've seen them before, and I really should have gone. I didn't go. But yeah, seeing them in person, it's pretty awesome.
Yes.
Like, they're fantastic, and their
It's
songs everyone's singing, dancing around, and having a great time. And then they play some slow stuff, and you're still loving it, and it's. Yeah,
I definitely my sets draw a lot of inspiration from that, because I typically will start off kind of slow, and then before you know it, I'm screaming. Yeah,
people have had a few drinks and they're enjoying it. Right. Like, okay, now I can lighten up a little bit.
Right.
Turn the volume up a touch and start banging chords for a little bit longer. With your classic rock kind of background, I guess, and love of that, people don't really solo that much anymore, do they? Like guitar solo.
I don't know. It really...
Because what I mean by that is, like, songs were a lot longer back then, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to...
Oh, it needs to be 3 minutes. It's on the radio.
Yeah.
I can't solo for an hour, for like a minute.
Right, like a Pink Floyd, like 8 minutes
exactly,
solo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in recordings, that's definitely the experience. And I think with a lot of pop music, that's the experience.
Yeah.
But honestly, with the community that I've seen... There's lots of soloing, and not just guitar solos. I mean, being into a jazz situation, everybody just trades off solos and they go on for 20 minutes, and that's always fantastic. But I implement solos into my stuff a lot. I have, I think, maybe 4 songs in the set where I'll just take a minute to do something.
It's easier doing it live than obviously in recording.
Right, and I think that's kind of the difference is, like, you have, in this situation, 3 minutes to get somebody's attention, and a solo doesn't tend to do that for people. But when you're in a live setting and they're watching you, you can give them that, and you can also tailor that solo and the feeling of it to the situation. And that makes sense. It works really well. But I do also implement solos into some of my recorded music.
Yeah. So... Funny you're in here today, because yesterday I did a podcast with a couple who have started a fashion brand, and music and fashion and rock and roll, like, it all goes together.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about, if people are watching, they'll definitely know your image, and I love it. It's fantastic because it makes you different from everybody else, right? And that's, you've got to stand out in a world today and show who you really are, and to have the confidence that you have to wear the clothes that you do and have your image. It does go back to classic rock.
Absolutely.
Because if you go back to David Lee Roth, right, the lead singer of Van Halen, and you see the outfits that he wore, or Freddie Mercury or whoever, right? Like, very rarely do you see that today. Right. So I am pleased to see you walk in today and be like, this is awesome, because you're clearly confident in yourself and you have an image and you stick to that, which is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Where does that come from?
I think probably the classic rock stuff. When I was kind of first looking at the image I wanted to portray as a performer, I looked back at Led Zeppelin, and they just, literally all I do is I just go to the women's section. Yeah. And the clothes that they have are fantastic. I'm like, and it's weird because sometimes it's something where, like, you'll see it on a female. Right. And it just kind of looks basic and boring. Yeah, it's like, oh, I've seen, dozens of people wearing this. But then when a guy puts it on, it's like,
edgy.
Right. Yeah. And something I also love about it is the silhouette, because it's like, for me, having the shoulders really prominent, it makes me look buffer than I ever will be.
I've used that trick many a time, wearing a suit and having the shoulder pads for sure.
Exactly.
You feel like Iron Man, right, when you put the suit on.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think that's where it came from, just kind of shopping and figuring out what looks good, and doing a lot of things that were wrong. And then, the makeup comes from just like the classic rock stuff. I've had some people give me crap for it, and it's like, okay,
yeah,
look at who you used to listen to and what they were wearing,
right? Yeah,
you know, and it's like, I think that a lot of people when they get older kind of aren't open to new ideas, and
100%.
It's like you have to relate it back to something, and then they're like, oh, that is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But the makeup just came from like, I mean, even in high school, you know, I'd have my lady friends put makeup on for me.
Yeah.
And it just like, I don't know, it makes me feel very confident, and there's not a lot of people that do it. There's not a lot of males that do it.
Right.
And I think everybody should try it because it's a lot of fun.
Sure, yeah.
And it really just, it's not even about what people say to you. It's like, It just makes you feel special, and I get why people do it.
Yeah, and I think probably when you're getting ready, right? It's like you're performing, aren't you? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting ready. You're not just becoming like Donovan that sits at home all day. You are like becoming Donovan who is about to go on stage and do their thing, isn't they? Like it must
is
be
a very
easy
good
for you to transition into. Okay, now I am
right.
that person on stage. Whereas if you would try to be that person all the time, you might burn out, and it might be a lot different.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, it is. It's a very good barrier because it's like when the makeup is on, I know I'm this persona.
Right.
You know, not to say that like I'm a different person when I'm not.
No, but it's like a mental switch,
artist.
Isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I mean, it's awesome. Like,
Thank
I'm
you
sure,
so
like,
much.
there's one of the things that I someone told me that like if you're doing something right, people like. You know you're doing something right when someone starts complaining about you doing it. Right?
Exactly.
Because you're like, it's so like new or so different that they don't like it because they either never tried it themselves and that's why they don't like it, or they just hate change.
Absolutely.
Right? And you're like, I know I'm doing something that's pushing the boat out. If people are like, I don't know if I like that. Right? That's so different. And like, well, there's a reason that it's different because I stand out, because people are going to be intrigued, and because people are like, oh, it just adds to, as well as the music, right? It's not just music, and it's the whole thing. And you talk about image, and we're such a visual world now with social media, and you know your album. No one has albums now, right? But if you did, the art cover would be a big thing. And now we just put our art cover on social media, and you know
Absolutely.
it's as well as, you know, you were speaking to Madeline, who was here earlier, right? Who works at the store. I mean, she as well addresses different to a lot of people, and she might be listening to this, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. Like, I don't mean it in a bad way. But when you walk into the store here, you know everyone's in there just casual, like their work clothes, and then you turn over and like, oh, Madeline's brought some color today, and that's cool to see because it's different. It makes you stand out. It makes you who you are, and you know, in a world where it must be really hard to stand out.
Absolutely.
You know, like I've stood out coming here because I have an accent and I'm different. I haven't had to really change my dress or clothing, but I even stood out because I would dress like if someone in the UK would dress, like do my top button up or whatever, and then skinnier type clothing.
Right.
So I did it without even knowing it. But yeah, it must be, you know, it's cool to see, and I like. It's I wish I had the confidence to pull it off. Yeah. Because I don't. I'm just like,
it's definitely when you're first doing it, it's like I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, especially in a place with a history like Oklahoma's, it's like I don't know if I'm gonna step out and somebody's gonna hurt me.
Yeah.
And so it can be scary at first, but I've really mostly just been met with positivity.
Yeah.
And if people don't like it, they just don't say anything.
Right.
But another part that I like about, you know, whatever it is that I do performing or, you know, the image that I put on is a lot of people, it allows people to put themselves in that situation mentally without having to actually do it, which is the really freaky part. And so I think that's why people like that kind of stuff, like the flashy colors and just whenever, you know, you see somebody that's walking around that looks different, but they're confident with it. It's like, man, that person is really comfortable with themselves. And it makes whoever's seeing it, you know, really, really happy and feel that confidence themselves. Yeah,
I'm sure it's definitely freeing. And it's, like I said, you're right. It's cool to see. And if they put themselves in that, so they're like, oh, I wonder what that is. And then they put themselves there, right, without like doing everything, taking the risk. So I guess like now, you know, like I mentioned earlier, we're working on your album, which is hopefully going to come out soon. And you just released a single in May. What I guess is kind of like planned for the rest of the year? And then, I know you mentioned you're going to Tulsa today to record. And are you still doing the production side of things as well for Dead Week and others?
Yeah. I've worked with Josh Masterson on some stuff, Joe Amico. All of these are just local musicians that I've had the pleasure to work with.
Yeah.
Great people. And so I typically do produce my own stuff because it's like I'm very like a perfectionist, like you said. And it gives me that control that I need, and I'm really comfortable with my workflow. But my mom lives in the same neighborhood as the studio. And so that's how she found out about it. So we went and did a tour. Yeah. And I showed them that song in all my glory, and they liked it. And they, I decided for this, it's just one song that I'm going to be recording with them. But I figured, I'd try something different, and they were really welcoming, and that made me want to go there and record. And there's also, I haven't really been to Tulsa very much.
Tulsa's
and there's
a great music city, right?
Right. There's a lot, and I want to go there and kind of steal their ideas and bring them back here. But yeah, typically I'll work on it in my little studio in my house.
Yeah. So do you want to do you want to be a performer and produce stuff, or do you want to just like there's probably going to come a time where you're going to be really good at both, and you're going to have to decide. Yeah,
I mean, it's really, I have to look at it kind of selfishly as I can, because I'm not very selfish, but it's like it all comes down to everything is back to me being an artist. And so working with other musicians, that's practice for my stuff. That helps me figure out my workflow, and it also gets me people that I can work with in the future, because I mean, I would absolutely love to do collaborations with people. And so I have thought about that, and it's really like at the end of the day, am going to work on my stuff first and get my stuff out, and then I'm happy with my extra time to be working with other people.
Right. No, that makes sense. And there's plenty of people out there that are amazing producers, right? And they're happy, and that's all they do is produce. Right. And there's some that are both, and there's some that are just like, no, I'm just going to do my thing.
Right.
Obviously, being from the UK, like I'm a huge Ed Sheeran fan, and I've been a huge Ed Sheeran fan for a long time. And Lewis Capaldi as well, who's just hilarious. But then, you talk about like Royal Blood from the UK, and others. The UK obviously has a pretty big indie scene as well, and I haven't listened to much of it, but Royal Blood are pretty good. They're kind of a bit heavier on the rock side, but they're bringing it back to what it used to be, I guess.
Absolutely.
And then Arctic Monkeys and all the rest. So it's funny, like trying to pick different, like compare the UK scene to the States. And like people thought I was cool because I listened to different music. I'm like, no, it's because I've been listening I only know this music. Right. I don't know what you listen to. It's the total opposite of cool. Right? Like I'm just like listening to all my UK stuff, and they're like, oh, that's really cool. I'm like, because it's different. Right. Not because it's like any better or whatever.
Right. And that's why there's the British invasion, because it was different.
Yeah. Mate, this is awesome. Thanks for coming down. I'm really excited to kind of, follow you now and wait for the album to come out.
Thank you so much.
For people listening, how can they go and listen to you on, Spotify or wherever it is and stuff like that?
I put it on as many streaming platforms as I can. Yeah. I kind of focus on Spotify because they're one of the biggest, and that's what I personally use. But Instagram, Donovan.Funk, they can find me. I'm always talking about kind of what I'm working on. And I have my links on my website, donovanfunk.com. And so that's the best way to go. And on Father's Day, on the 20th, I'm releasing a single that my dad actually wrote when I was like being born.
Oh, sick.
And so he did that song, and he had it recorded because he was in a band. And I've been listening to that for the last 20 plus years. And so this is kind of like my little Father's Day gift to him.
That's awesome. Yeah. Does he have any idea yet?
He might. Yeah. I haven't told him explicitly though. Yeah. But he might have an idea.
That's awesome.
And so that's the next project I'm working on. And so for anybody, I've shown it to a few people, and I think a lot of people can either relate or picture themselves in that situation,
Sure.
where it's like they might not have grown up with a good dad, because a lot of people haven't.
Right.
And I feel really fortunate that I have. And so this kind of gives them that experience of what it's like to have a good father figure.
Yeah.
And then, so the studio that I'm going to, we're working on my follow-up single.
Gotcha.
And that's all I have really planned. So that one will be likely in August. I haven't announced it yet,
Sure.
but I also am working with this artist named Sistoli, and he's a new artist. He's the singer for Dead Week, but we're doing kind of a solo project thing too. And we have something coming out at the end of July. And so my whole summer I've had a release every month.
Yeah.
And then I think I'm going to lay off and like finish the album and then just be like, here it is.
Sweet, dude. That's exciting. It gives you plenty of work to do this summer, right?
Absolutely.
It's nothing worse than being stuck in your room in your house and be like, I don't have any ideas. I have nothing to do right now. But sweet. Well, for everyone listening, I'll put the links to Donovan's social website and Spotify links as well down in the description, and you can go straight there, listen to it, and just give him a follow. And if you're in a venue that's listening that wants someone to open up, Jones, Tower, Criteria, anyway, reach out. So thanks for coming. Yeah,
thank you so much.
I want to see you on stage, man. It's gonna be awesome.
Thank you.
For everyone listening, thanks so much, and we'll catch you next episode. Cheers. This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Also, huge shout out to RCB Bank for jumping on board to be a sponsor. RCB Bank's loan promotion is here for a limited time. Head into any of their 40 Oklahoma locations to get as low as 1.79 APR on your next car, boat, camper, or ATV. Apply online at rcbbank.com. RCB Bank, that's my bank. Rate and finance with approved credit. Restrictions apply. And member FDIC. Huge shout out to my sponsors. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.